Hi, my name's Josh Kingett. I'm one of the esports executives for Digital Isle of Man. My background in esports started roughly 10 years ago, first as a professional player, then moving on into coaching, managing, and now owning my own esports team called X7, which is the first and only esports organisation on the Isle of Man. So my skill set is very much towards company structure, organisations and the individuals within the esports industry, whereas Liam caters for the other half of that.
And I'm Liam Slack, the other half of the esports executive team here in the Digital Isle of Man agency. My side of the industry is building on the experience that I've had working with tournament operators, video game publishers, and generally organizing events for the esports scene that teams like Josh's can take part in.
E-gaming is better described as gambling or betting, mostly using online software, so everything from slots to sports books from the regular bookies. Esports is essentially the professional side of the video game industry, so anything where it's a player versus a player or a team versus a team, that kind of encapsulates what esports is. It's that competitive side of playing video games. Esports can be traced back decades, really as far as way before I was born. You'd have 2D esports, things like Pong is a good example. Two just sliding plates bouncing a ball against each other. You can turn really any game into a competitive setting. Those games that are single player based can often be turned into a speedrunning example. It's the fastest person to complete the game rather than who does it better against each other. But it does trace back to the early origins of technology, really. So that goes back into the 80s or 90s.
In terms of the esports industry, currently a $2 billion industry, but it's been growing heavily year on year for the past decade. But it's important to remember it's a subsection of the wider video game industry. Now $90 billion industry, everyone is aware of the size and scope of video games and the impact it's having on culture and society. And esports is a subsection of that. It's an industry that falls into that vein and is growing alongside it.
You can fill stadiums and arenas. You've got the Super Bowl as an example back in 2019, which managed to pull in around 100 million viewers. And in the same year, the League of Legends World Championship amassed more viewership than the Super Bowl did.
From a Digital Isle of Man standpoint as a whole, we really look to work with digital ecosystems and new emerging industry in the digital space. So you'll be familiar, those watching might be familiar with how that's been done previously with the e-gaming industry or the blockchain industry or fintech industry on the island, and esports is sort of the purview that Josh and myself have when it comes to that. And what we look to do is really help both build attractive support mechanisms for those ecosystems as they emerge so that they can grow healthily, as well as make the Isle of Man a place that is within that space and is drive awareness for the Isle of Man and the opportunities that can be had here when it comes to working in a digital environment.
Mm-hmm. I think prior to us starting, there was a bigger focus on the individuals, trying to educate people on an individual level what esports is, which is great, and that's part of the process. But once these people have been educated about the opportunities that exist within the esports sector, there's nowhere for them to go on island. There's no businesses yet that are catered towards the esports industry. So part of the reason and part of what me and Liam are trying to achieve here is to educate those businesses on what those opportunities are, how they can add value to the industry. And then once we've reversed it around and focused more on grassroots, we can really build people up and help funnel them into those companies on island that can cater for them. Wednesday we hosted kind of our esports for business event, so it was split into 3 separate workshops. The first one was focused on corporate service providers, financial services and banks. The second one was around marketing, event production and broadcasting. And then the last one was more around e-gaming, blockchain, data security. So we really tried to touch as many industries as possible within that session. Whilst we do understand there are some that we left out, a bit more niche industries, like most esports teams have at the top level have a sports psychologist or a nutritionist or a chef or a PT, dedicated support structures, and that might be something we look at in the future. But this, as our first event, was speaking to the wider industries and educating them of, okay, this is how big the industry is, this is what you need to do to be a part of it, and then outlining what we want to do at Digital Isle of Man in order to help them achieve that.
Yeah, ultimately these are industries that are already on the Isle of Man. They have dedicated top quality, best in class products and services for their sectors, and the esports industry is not some black box that does not touch other business sectors. It has the same business structure requirements, it has the same financial service and banking requirements, the same marketing, broadcast, all of these initiatives, brand building, everything to do with the esports industry has these, can work with these products and can be business for our industries on island. And yeah, that is what our objective was last week, was to work with industries on that are already here on island and kind of showcase how their products are being used in the esports space already and how it's a place that they can maybe take next steps with their business. For the next 12 months, we have a couple of core components. Events like the Esports for Business workshop that we held last week, working with on-island partners to build out catalogs of services, products, understand the businesses on island and what they want to bring to the esports market, and making sure that we're cataloging that and going out to the industry, spreading awareness for the Isle of Man at conferences and events throughout the world, as well as those businesses and their products, that what's available on the island for anyone who might be interested in either relocating business or doing business with the Isle of Man. In addition to that, as Josh had mentioned, we were looking at hosting stakeholder workshops and building out baseline codes of conduct, doing initial work with industry stakeholders to prepare a slow and steady path to supportive legislation for the esports industry, helping safeguard the future of the industry and secure further opportunities for investment as it goes.
There's been a lot of talk about, or a lot of interest, whether or when we're going to host the first Isle of Man esports event. I think it's inevitable. We will eventually host something. Whether it's in the next 12 months, we can't yet say that. But when possible, we'd like to work with as many local partners as possible to make that happen. We have had conversations already with big tournament operators that would be interested in using the Isle of Man as a location for some of their events. So it's definitely not out of the realms of possibility. It's just finding the right time, the right place, with the right people. But yeah, it will happen at some point. You could be playing Call of Duty or Rocket League or League of Legends, and your day-to-day routine is dependent on that. So from a League of Legends perspective, for a player, dependent again upon how professional you are. If you're at the very top, I can only expect that you're probably training 8 to 10 hours a day. Again, you'll have analysis and review sessions with a head coach, maybe a strategic coach or an assistant coach. There's a much larger coaching team than many would expect. Around that, your mental health is very important. For a youngster, maybe 15 or 16, they're exposed to a lot of hate online quite early on. If they don't perform as well, they're going to get a lot of lashback from fans or people who aren't fans of them or the organisation they play for. So there's a lot of support structure around that. You'll have a PT usually that makes sure your physical health is up to scratch. When you're sat down for so long throughout the day, it's often something you forget about, or it's quite easy. The hours in the day just fly past. So there's a lot. When you see esports for the first time, you see 5 players on the stage playing. A lot of people would expect, well, it's just them and the coach stood behind them and that's it. But behind that, there are dozens and dozens of people that are there to monitor your posture when you're sat there, or monitor your sleep patterns, and it's crazy when you get to that high level.
I think there's a number of different opportunities within the Isle of Man for industry stakeholders that are heavily involved with the esports side of things, whether it comes to marketing agencies that have the brand planning and build out strategy for both the teams and players and everything in that vein, as well as the tournament operators on that side of things. They have touch points all over the industry, and as a result, having partners in that vein is extremely valuable to the Isle of Man. Similarly, tournament operators in terms of either broadcast partners or event partners. Josh was speaking kind of about the day-to-day player industry lifestyle, but for each of those events as well, you have marketing coordinators, social media coordinators, you have event production teams that handle all of the lighting and rigging, and broadcast teams that handle all of the equipment setup, throughput, all the remote and broadcasting systems that go into it. So tournament operation teams and marketing agencies are very, very valuable. And then of course, when it comes to the wider video game industry, game publishers, whether that's within traditional console and PC environments, or whether that's mobile-based video game publishers, or the intellectual property holders within esports, and as a result, often have a very, very, I wouldn't say oversized, but a heavy impact on how the esports industry works. So those are three sectors that would be of particular interest to us, but amongst many.